Now we move to a topic that's truly important to me. It's one that I wage my own personal battles with here. Now, a study conducted by Matlin, the Israeli Psychotrauma Center at Jerusalem's Herzog Medical Center, shows that Israeli military veterans who experienced the violence of conflict, from actively fighting in a war to closely surviving a terror attack, were 3 times more likely to develop aggressive behavior in civilian life than those who did not. Now, the study of post-army men emerges as each year. Now they take surveys. Thousands of released Israeli combat soldiers face this difficult transition back to civilian life. Many spend months overseas as a means to discharge and mitigate some of the psychological impact of the intense experiences of their military service. We're joined by Dr. Cohen, a forensic psychiatrist, coming to us from Cornell University Medical Center in New York. Thanks for joining us in the early hours here as well, Dr. Cohen. So on the discoveries of this latest survey, the study that traumatized individuals 3 times more likely to present aggression, is it in line with what's known on the subject of PTSD, or are there new things being learned all the time here?
Well, this study is in line with previous research. So there is American and British research that really looked at what is the association between PTSD and violence. We've long known that there are increased rates of PTSD in individuals who carry out, let's say, domestic abuse, or even individuals who are in jail and prison. And we see in the U.S., we see increased rates of veterans in jail or prison. So there's been a lot of research trying to understand what's leading veterans to go into jail or prison. It's a complicated picture, yeah. But one of the things that has been found is that it's not so much the presence of PTSD that leads to violent behavior in veterans in their civilian life. It really is related to combat exposure. So the more violence that you witness or that you're involved in during your military service, the higher your risk that you're going to exhibit violence in civilian life.
Of course, it's peeling back the layers of everyone's mind, a highly individualistic response to experiences as well. But I want to look at the big picture here. You're in the U.S., so you have your head in that scene as well. Post 9/11 U.S. veterans suffering from PTSD, I think those are mainly the communities that we're referencing here. They've been received, I should say, by a country that really learned hard lessons from Vietnam. I mean, has Israel not had its learning moment, so to say, or is it upon us now, sort of a reckoning here in Israel on this subject?
Israel has significant differences from the U.S. It's an embattled country. It's also a country with universal conscription. So all men, and in fact women, many women, not all women, but of course many women are serving in the military. And so I think that and of course the military is held in very high esteem, especially in the early decades of the country. And so there may have been a tendency to some denial about the terrible psychological effects of combat. And there is a culture of a macho culture in Israel, as of course there is in the U.S. and many other places. But I think that those things tend to lead veterans to not want to disclose the difficulties that they're having. And
along those lines, Dr. Cohen, is it massively underdiagnosed, would you say, in Israel in particular?
The data on that is a little bit hard to parse. I think it probably is fair to say that it's underdiagnosed. We certainly know that in the U.S. It's underdiagnosed. The best data that we have in the U.S. is that if you are exposed to combat, rates of PTSD are around 30%. And if you look at the rates of PTSD diagnosis in Israel in combat-exposed veterans, they're well below that number. So I think there is reasons to believe that it's underdiagnosed.
I'd agree with that notion here. Dr. Cohen, thanks for joining us from New York, of all places. Thank you.